From the Hadramaut in Yemen, caravans of spice trade down north through Mecca and Medina and reaching all of Europe. In North Arabia, in about 500 AD, the Ghaznavids took over. By 528, they controlled the Syrian desert over to the outskirts of Medina. Syriac, a form of Aramaic related to Arabic, was their official language. As early as 463, the Jews translated the Torah and Old Testament from Hebrew into Syriac. The British Museum has a copy. It's made available to the Hassan, who were Christians, and the Jewish tribes in Arabia. Sergius of Rossini, divided Constantinople in 536, one of the earliest and greatest translators from Greek and Syriac, translated Arabic, including 26 verses of Caleb. This made him available in the kingdom of Khosrow I in Persia, to the Hassan tribe whose influence extended to the outskirts of Medina. Khosrow I, Arabic Kisra, king of Persia, is known as Khosrow the Great. His troops conquered areas as far away as Yemen, and he also loved learning and started several schools. The school of Shibnishapur became, during Khosrow I's long reign of 48 years, the greatest intellectual center of the time. Within its walls, Greek, Jewish, Estonian, Persian, and Hindu thought and experience were freely exchanged. Teaching was mostly Syriac, from Syriac translations from Greek texts. This meant that Aristotle, Hippocrates, and Galen were readily available when the medical school at Shibnishapur was operating during his reign. The next step was that the conquering Arabs compelled the historians to translate the Syriac texts of Greek medicine into Arabic. The translation from Syriac to Arabic was easy, as the two languages had the same grammar. Concerning the local medical situation during Muhammad's life, we know there were physicians living in Arabia during this period. Khalid bin Khalid was a physician trained in the healing arts. He was born about the middle of the 6th century at Taif, in the tribe of Bani Thaqif. He traveled through Yemen and then Persia, where he received his education in the medical sciences at the Greek Medical School of Shibnishapur, and thus was intimately acquainted with the medical teachings of Aristotle, Hippocrates, and Galen. Having completed his studies, he practiced as a physician in Persia. During his time, he was called to the court of King Khosrow, with whom he had a long conversation. He came back to Arabia about the beginning of Islam and settled down at Taif. While there, the Khalid of Yemen came to see him in connection with a certain disease, and on being cured, rewarded him with much money and a slave girl. Though Khalid bin Khalid did not write any book on medicine, his views on many medical problems are preserved in his conversation with Khosrow. About the eye, he says that it is constituted of fat, which is the light part. And then the second is constituted with water, which is the black part, and of wind, which constitutes the ice. Well, these things we know to be wrong now. This was Greek thought. All this was to show the acquaintance of Khalid with the Greek doctors. Summarizing the situation in a few words in his book, He's Tried to Let the Arab, Dr. Lucien Leclerc writes, Khalid bin Khalid studied medicine at Shibnishapur, and Muhammad owed Khalid part of his medical knowledge. Thus, with the one as well as the other, we easily recognize the traces of Greek medicine. Sometimes Muhammad treated the sick, and in the difficult cases, he would send the patients to Khalid. Another educated person around Muhammad was and cousin of Muhammad, and had also visited the court of Khosrow. He had learned Persian and music, which he introduced among the Quraysh at Mecca. However, he was not sympathetic to Muhammad, mocking some of the stories in the Quran. Muhammad never forgave him for this, and when he was taken prisoner at the Battle of Badr, he caused him to be put to death. Summary seated one, Arabs living in Mecca and Medina in 600 had political and economic relations with people from Ethiopia, Byzantine. Muhammad knew Persian was Syrian. 3. The Hassan tribe, which was Syrian desert over to the gate of Medina, used Syriac, one of the main languages used to teach medicine in Shapur is their official language. The new king of Yemen came to top and sold position high in Balada, who had been trained where? During Shapur, the best medical school in the world, and to whom Muhammad sometimes sent patients. 5. During Muhammad's lifetime, a new medical school was established in Alexandria, using the 16 books of Caleb as the text. This all shows that there was ample opportunity for Muhammad and the people around him to have heard the embryological theories of Aristotle when they and other local lives. Also, the Quran says in the late Meccan Surah of the Believer, 4067, He is who created you from dust, then from a sperm drop, then from leech-like clot. Perhaps you may understand. And then the Surah of the Pilgrimage, O mankind, if you have doubted on the resurrection, consider what we have created, that we have created from dust. It is correct for us to ask again, what were they to understand? What were they to consider? And here look is that which claims for each case substance. On the contrary, even time was demonstrating the agreement between the Quran and the Greek medicine. Their agreement is error. The final witness is the commentary of Baydawi in 1200 AD. Here we have the commentary, we have the Quran here, we have his commentary, a piece of solid blood is an explanation about because underlined that's from the Quran. And here's his explanation, a piece of solid blood. He goes on a piece of meat from the Quran. A piece of meat is as much as 10 shoes. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this study, it has been said that the idea of the embryo developing through stages is a modern one. And the Quran is anticipating modern embryology by different stages. That we have seen that Aristotle, Hippocrates, the Indians, and Galen have all discussed the stages of embryological development during the 1,000 years before the Quran. And after the coming of the Quran, the account of the different stages, as described by the Quran and Greek doctors, was carried on in the teachings of Avicenna and Ibn Qayyim. It is essentially the same as that taught by Galen and those preceding him. Combining the it's clear, as Dr. Ward demonstrated so capably in his textbook, that must start from the science at the same time as the cartilage models of the bones. There's no bone stage where there's a skeleton sitting here, and then the muscles are plastered down. It's equally clear that Allah in the Quran means clock, and that the Quraysh who heard Muhammad speaking understood it to be referring to the menstrual blood as a female contribution to the blood. Therefore, we can conclude during all these years of Quranic verses of embryology, saying that man has created a drop of sperm which became the clock, or in accord with science of the time of the Quran. But when compared to the modern science of the 20th century, Hippocrates is in error, Aristotle is in error, Galen is in error, and the Quran is in error. They are all in serious error. Now we're going to look a little bit about moonlight. Does the Quran state that the moon gives off reflected light from the sun? Or this was common knowledge. The Surah of Noah 71:15-16 says, "See not how Allah has created the 7 heavens one above another, and made the moon a light, nur in their midst, and made the sun a lamp, siraj. The moon is called a light, Arabic nur, and the sun a lamp, siraj." Some Muslims claim that since the Quran uses different words, speaking about the light of the sun and the light of the moon, it reveals that the sun is a source of light, while the moon only reflects light. This claim is applied very strongly by Shabir Ali in his book Science of the Quran, and stated clearly by Dr. Zakir Naik in his video is the Quran God's word. You will now see clearly.
Light that you have, light that you obtain from the moon. What tell me the previous talk that the moon was its own light. Today, after science advanced, the light of the moon is not its own, but a reflected light. That is mentioned in the Quran, 25, verse 1. That is he who has created the constellation and the moon. The moon is light is black, moon is broad light, or moon which is reflected light. The constellation, the light of the moon is light. 1400 years ago. For a time, and I do like it.
Near the end of the video, we heard Dr. Nick explain the Arabic word for moon is qamar, and the light described there is munir, which is borrowed light, or nur, which is a reflection of light. Please do not forget what we said. Munir is borrowed light, and nur is reflected light. Not only is this light to be a statement in keeping with scientific truth, but it is also likely to be scientifically miraculous, since it was only discovered relatively recently. It is correct that the moon does not emit its own light, but only reflects the light of the sun. This is known already almost 1,000 years before Muhammad. Aristotle in about 360 BC discussed knowing that the earth was round by its shadow on the moon. He could use shadow across the moon, and the moonlight is reflected. If we don't to this miracle of scientific knowledge, then we must ask ourselves which right above Surah Al-Furqan 27, 25, 61. It is simply lamp referring to the sun. The Surah Naba 78:13, Surah Jan Wajan, being the dazzling lamp, again indicating the sun. The words nur and munir come from the same Arabic word. The word munir is used in the Quran. 4 times, Surah Imran 3:184, Hajj 22:8, 31:20, Fatir 35:35. The past 7 munir. Yusuf Ali translate as a book of the night, and Pickle uses scripture giving light. Clearly, this indicates a book which is radiating the light of knowledge. Nothing but reflection. Nur. It says in Surah Noah 71:16 and Yunus 10:5 that Allah made the light the moon light. Thus, we find that the Quran says that the moon is light, and it never says that the moon reflects light. Moreover, in other verses, the Quran says that Allah is the Nur, the light. Surah Nur 24:35, one of the most beautiful passages in the Quran reads, Allah is the light, Nur of the heavens and the earth. The parable of light is that there was a niche, and within it a